Coming up, deja vu in Brooklyn. Once again, the Nets cannot close the deal, this time against the Milwaukee Bucks. We break down the enormous performance from Cam Thomas, if it was just too much Giannis, and the tale of a million little moments, all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR. Over here, Adam Armbrecht, host of the Devil's Puck Luck podcast. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. And Doug, where we get started with a 129-125 loss at home to the Milwaukee Bucks is just a game and maybe an early season for the Brooklyn Nets that feels like we will always talk about these handful of moments. And if they could just break the right way for Brooklyn, we're having much more joyous post-game conversations.
Thank goodness they won close games against the Bulls and the Heat, so we
That's
know
right.
that they're not just like they can close. They can close close games because after the first two losses to begin the season, getting choked up. After the first two losses to start the season, and then this one where you feel like it's not in hand, but it could go either way, right? I think there's a few of these games now that it feels like they could have gone either way. And sometimes it's easier to remember the losses than the wins when it comes to this because you want to just assume the wins are going to always be there for you and feel like you deserve something more when it comes to the losses. But this game was one of those ones where I really felt like this was absolutely toe-to-toe. It really was coin flippy sort of territory for me, and it was where the ball was going to bounce. Both teams couldn't stop what the other team wanted to do. 1 million points were scored, and it was going to kind of at that point come down to either sort of who had the ball last or who could just get the ball to bounce to them the right way, 2 or 3 times in a row. And the Nets just couldn't do that. We could go through some of these little plays that happened because there was a few of them. But I think in the end, to me, that's sort of what this game came down to. It was like, which way is the ball going to bounce? And this night just felt like it just wasn't going to bounce the Nets' way, sort of no matter what was going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's essentially at least for me and for you, the overarching theme of this game. Just as a reminder, the Nets are down 108-109 at the 8:48 mark in the fourth quarter. They proceed to go on a 12-0 run. They get themselves back into this game so that it is this back and forth. But as you mentioned, inside of this fourth quarter is some of these little sequences. I think most notably, because it came so close to the end, was the Dorian Finney-Smith under the basket. It just feels like he gets it there. He does the right thing, pump fakes, gets the defenseman away from him, goes up. Oh, wait, there happens to be another guy. His name is Giannis, and he's going to go ahead and swat away what felt like an automatic 2 points there. And that wasn't the only one, but every single time one of those happened, it was just like this little knock to your rib cage and enough of those blows. And finally you take a knee, right? Like finally you take a knee. And when the ref asks you want a 5 count, you say, no, I'm all good. I'm all good. I'm going to stay down.
And the refs let him play in this game, that DFS play. I mean, Giannis gave him a little push in the back. If you want to complain about that, like maybe you could have gotten a foul there. The refs were pretty consistently not calling anything tonight. And I think I'm fine with that. I think, there was a ton of contact both ways outside of the weird Portis call, which we can talk about. But like outside of that one, I didn't think there was anything egregious in that. I felt like there was plenty of contact on both sides, but I didn't feel it was outweighed for one team over the other. Like I think they just let him play, and I appreciate that. So I can see not calling that foul on Giannis near the end with the DFS thing, but it was one of those plays that sort of happened in slow motion. I mean, in real time, it was happening in slow motion. You're like, oh, what's going to happen here? We have to score this, and to not score it, it's not the reason they lost the game, but it exemplified what sort of we're talking about with like that play can go one way or the other. And there's a few of those where just I would go through a few more, but there's a few of those that just didn't go the Nets way.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to that foul play on Bobby Portis, but the other one here too, just to hit some of these moments, was the 1, 2, 3, 4 times when these tap outs on the offensive end that just gave Giannis second life. It's like, Giannis isn't a perfect 3-point shooter, but when he stands in the exact same spot and the ball comes right back to him, you're like, it's going to go in. And this is true of so many of the best players.
Usually you want him taking those shots. Like, you love it. You love the
Yep.
fact that he's taking those shots. Most times, like 3-pointers, dude, have at it. Go get full off them, like whatever. But you're right, though. It becomes shooting practice at some point when they're going to keep coming back to you.
And the other one, so just on that foul there, because then I do want to get into, I had mentioned coming into the game day preview, which you get exclusively on the podcast feed. There were certain things I thought the Nets needed to do to be successful, and they did it for basically 3 quarters. And the fourth quarter, it reared its ugly head. But let's just tie a bow on what they refer to as a common foul. I know this is like, it's a moment. How it's not a take foul. The ball is in the paint of the Milwaukee Bucks end of the court, and Bobby Portis just gives Mikal Bridges a little tug across the jersey, brings him to the ground. You think the lengthy review is, are we going to go flagrant here? Are we going to get, shots and and possession? After all of it, they come and they go, hey, common foul. And this is once again a second time, I think, early in the season where you see Jacques Vaughn and his disbelief around what he's being explained to by the crew. That was the only one for me that I was like, you have to explain the logic to me on this, because it's happening so far away from the play. It's not remotely a basketball related play. Yeah. It's like Bobby was willing to take it. Portis wanted it. And then the refs were like, no, side out.
Well, it can't be a take foul because they didn't have clear paths. So like
that's fine.
But that's fine. But the part where it's probably a flagrant and they should get a shot in the ball, like that part was like pretty clear to me. And I think everyone was both sides were shocked when it didn't end up being the case. Again, none of these things individually are the reason they lost the game, but I think they offer up examples of sort of, like what we're saying is that when you have I thought this was a very even game. Like these two teams, this is a good sign for the Nets too, by the way, because that's a full strength Bucks team, and the Nets are still down Claxton and Cam Johnson, and for some reason Spencer Dinwiddie didn't play the whole. They basically was iced from the last 15 minutes, so not really sure what happened there, but that's their full strength versus the Nets clearly not full strength, and Nets went toe to toe with this team. Again, they allowed 1 million points, but they came into this game with a clear plan, I thought, and they executed more sets in this game than they had maybe in all the other games combined, as far as like what the notes I was taking. So I think overall, when it feels like you're evenly matched with a team, it is going to sometimes come down to those plays. And if there's going to be a few that just kind of you go busto on, then it is going to be hard to win. And even with that, they're still down to the last couple possessions where they just can't get buckets, and it kind of slips away.
Including this is like in the first half on the short shot 3-pointer where Giannis is like, oh yeah, guess what? I'll happen to be right in front of the rim here, and I'll just go ahead and flip this over my head for an easy bucket. That maybe is the overarching sentiment here. But inside, coming up in a second, we'll highlight Cam Thomas, who almost had a career high in points with 45. Guys got to work a little bit harder. Also, the key stats that I thought were going to matter in this matchup and ultimately the fourth quarter bore themselves out. We'll get into that coming up in 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, let's tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. There's no better time to get in on the action over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers on FanDuel, they're giving this stuff away over here, folks. $150 in bonus bets. You're going to get that with any winning $5 money line bet. So if you're putting the $5 money line bet in, maybe tonight you thought, I don't really believe in the Nets tonight. I think the Bucks are going to take it. You put it in the Bucks money line. You would have got $150 if that team that you went for won. That would have been the Bucks for you. Let's save it. Let's go for one where the Nets are going to win. We'll put the money line in on that one over on FanDuel, and we'll feel good. We'll have them coming and going. FanDuel's got you covered for everything you want when it comes to betting spreads, player props, over-unders, so much more. And by the way, with these player props too, I mean, they've sliced and diced this more ways than you could ever imagine. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL and NBA season right now. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL.
So as we continue our post-game podcast live on YouTube, where we always remind you, get over there, turn on your alerts so you know when we're going with these as well. In a game that was 129-125 in favor of the Bucks, coming into this, I had said that I thought some of the big concern here areas were going to be The Milwaukee Bucks get to the line tremendously, usually 30 times a game. The Nets only 19 times a game. And through 3 quarters, they did what I thought they needed to, which was try to play hard defense, try to play physical, and avoid putting these guys at the line. But in the fourth quarter, you get overpowered. Like Giannis just dictates terms so much on the offensive end for you. It's a real struggle. The pace kind of quickens a little bit, and that I think makes it even harder to stay true to your assignments. And in the end, this ends up being 24 trips to the line, some late shots, 13 for Brooklyn. That's just one of the big categories that we'll touch into a little bit more here. But a big part, Doug, why this team was in this game is because 36% of their scoring was provided by one Cam Thomas. He went off in this one, and he went off at every single level. This was the full, complete package for Cam Thomas. Not that he hasn't been incredible already, but this was everything, including the perimeter shooting.
Yeah, you hate to lose this one when Cam just absolutely balls out, and they had no answer for him. He was on one of those ridiculous Cam heaters where his body's twisting and contorting in so many different ways.
Owl.
And you just can't hit the owl. I'm still holding on hope that's going to come in. The nickname's going to come in, but we're a couple year plus into it. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but he has these games every once in a while. You can tell when he's on one, and it's just it doesn't matter how big you are or who's near the rim or who's guarding him. He's going to twist his body in every single direction, make absolutely ridiculous shots. And that was really the case. I mean, he hit some crazy high degree of difficulty shots in this game. Like that floater that he hit, I know it looks easy because you're like close to the basket. That shot is so hard. That's one of the hardest shots in basketball, I think. Like to do the on the run floater over a guy a foot taller than you. Like it has to be perfect.
You're waiting for that defender to drop enough so that you can get up over the top of him. So everything about your timing on those shots is off from what you would normally do.
It's going higher than normal, so it has to go directly in. Like you can't, it's not, you're not banking it, so there's nothing to slow the ball down. I mean, like there's a lot of reasons why that's a really tough shot. Anyway, this is why another reason this game kind of sucks to lose. Now, again, you might go the other way with Giannis and be like, hey, if Giannis is going to get 36 and get to the line a bunch, or what do you get? Yeah, if he's going to go 36 and 12, like the Bucks will be pissed if they lost that game too. So like you can make this case for both sides, but this was definitely a case of like both teams were just throwing their haymakers at each other with these two dudes, and to some degree Bridges. And Thomas just showed, like, I mean, when he has it going, he is one of the very best pound for pound scorers in all of basketball. It won't be on every night, but tonight it was for sure on. And then, like, when we get to the end of it, and we can talk about some of the reasons that got him open, but when you get to this one, it just sucks. Like, it sucks to lose it because you're like 45 points and he lost. Like, that shouldn't happen. And then here we are.
Yeah, and a note from the Brooklyn Nets PR here: most 40-point games by a net age 22 and younger.
Yeah.
5 for Bernard King. It's 5 for Cam Thomas. And then he went ahead with that 45-point performance tonight. So he's already, like, he's on the verge of making history here, only having had, I think it was 6 starts last season. So you think about everything that Cam Thomas, like, we wrap this up in the idea of, oh, yeah, well, we're used to seeing this because we've seen these sample sizes of big performances. Again, he was 2 points shy of tying his career high at 47, but they were never coming in these games. They were never coming when he was giving you max minutes in games that mattered. And again, I know we find ourselves doing this a lot when it comes to this team early in this season, but this is another example against a team in Milwaukee, as you mentioned, full strength. There's a lot of length on this team. There's a lot of size on the interior. There's a lot of reasons for this not to be a game that lines up well for Cam Thomas. He is now. He's top 20 scorer in the league right now. I don't see this fading away. He is going to be a guy that gives you 25 plus points a night with consistency because the full repertoire was there for him, including 6 of 16, and that was with some late threes. He was 6 of 13 at one point from beyond the arc, 17 of 33 from the field, and he balanced it out with 3 assists, Doug, which I think is important.
They were running more sets and they were running more deliberate actions tonight than I've really seen. We saw early pin downs. I mean, Dinwiddie ran a couple of pin downs for these guys. They ran a few double drags, and stagger screen stuff to get guys freed up coming across. They even ran like a ridiculous horn set one time that failed miserably, but whatever. But because that's what happens. That's what happens when you run Lonnie Walker into your horns. Like that's not how they drew it up in the original time they did it. But regardless, one thing I was getting concerned around this team was that they weren't really running many deliberate actions. It was mostly like screen switch, let Bridges shoot, screen switch, let Cam Thomas shoot. Tonight, it was still some of that, but there was more to it. Simmons helps with this because he's able to open up stuff. There's a little bit more motion to it. He's a very deliberate screener. And so he's going to get him to dribble handoff. And, sometimes you can, sometimes they'll run pistol and zoom. Not a ton for that tonight, but in general, I think we saw tonight, like, hey, we know how we're going to attack this. We want Mikal and Cam to get through screens and attack the drops as much as possible. We know Brook Lopez is going to play drop. They're going to play drop with Giannis when Brook Lopez is off. And they really went after that, like, every single time. And it worked. Like, that was the right plan. Good job by Jacques Vaughn and company, at least on the offensive end. They attacked the drop as much as possible with two dudes that are sort of built to do it. And in the end, it wasn't enough, but I thought I was really encouraged early on by the deliberate actions I think we saw them running.
Yeah, to your point, Mikal Bridges, 12 of 21 from the field, struggled from beyond the arc, got to the line 7 times in this game. He played 39 minutes. Thomas played 41. They combined for 54% of the Brooklyn Nets shooting from the field in terms of attempts. And I think what you're speaking to is, excuse me, where this can grow to if you can start to manufacture real opportunities, not, okay, you go do, now you go do. It's one of those things I talked about with Mikal and Cam and saying, can these guys share the court effectively together? Tonight was an example, and even last game too a bit, where you can build these guys into where they can work off of one another, create space for one another, and as you mentioned, attack some of that drop coverage. So again, it's a loss, but there's these encouraging things that come out of it, and I can't help but think about some of the other players in this matchup that we can get to here in a minute. When we look over to the Milwaukee side, because I just want to make sure, as you said, balance this out. Milwaukee could probably say the same thing, right? Giannis only gets to the line 6 times in this game. He'd say, hey, I'm getting fouled a bunch here. I should have been there more frequently. Damian Lillard, who has not shot well from beyond the arc so far in Milwaukee, continued those struggles, just 2 of 8. So I think when we say that this was a game that could have gone either way, it very much could have. And that means the Nets could have won this game by 3 or 4 points. They could have lost this game by 15. Milwaukee is an incredibly talented team, and you can see how it takes everything for the Nets to be in these games. And coming up here in a second, we'll talk about some role players, maybe some tired legs for Dorian Finney-Smith getting asked to do so much early in this season, and if the Nets can continue to manufacture these opportunities and get across the line. We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Jace Medical. Look, when it comes to medical stuff, the worst thing you can be is unprepared. You got unrest, you got storms, you got fires, you got hurricanes, you got supply chain stuff, like all these different things out there in the world that can stop you from getting the health things that you need in your life. This is where Jace has solved it for you. You get a personalized emergency medication kit. It's got 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. I've been down this road too with traveling too. I mentioned there's things in the world. If you're a traveler out there, Jace is an absolute necessity, because sometimes you're just in places where you're not going to have your doctor coverage. You're not going to have just the local drugstore that you can just go to. Jace has solved this. You're going to get this stuff in the mail, and you're just not going to have to worry about it. You're going to get peace of mind. Maybe you know someone in your life that travels, or that they could just use it in their life. Get a gift card for your family or your loved ones. Know that there's a little peace of mind with the Jace case of their own. Go to jacemedical.com, enter the code locked on at checkout for a $20 discount for these 5 life-saving antibiotics. You're going to get $5 off, or $20 off that order with the promo code locked on at Jace Medical. That's JASE medical.com.
All right, as we continue to tie a bow onto the Brooklyn Nets losing at home to the Milwaukee Bucks 129-105 on the Postgame podcast. A reminder, not only to be over on YouTube, where we're doing the postgames live all season long, but also go over to joinsubtext.com/lockedonnets and be a part of the conversation. We are going to have an off-day discussion around point averages and what the hierarchy is of this Nets team. Got a great question from somebody over there. 14-day free trial. Joinsubtext.com/lockedonnets. Doug, before we talk some individual players here, this is something else I'm going to remind you. We talked about this in the last game as well. The Nets had more shot attempts in this game than Milwaukee. They shot a higher field goal percentage. They shot a higher percentage from beyond the arc. They lost the free throw battle. They only lost the rebound battle by 2 in this game, 1 offensive and 1 defensive difference. They didn't have the assists were okay for them based on the volume. That's going to be a lot from Cam Thomas needing to do the heavy lifting. Points in the paint were dead even. Like, the only thing, fast break, 20-11. When a team is winning this many categories and mitigated turnovers, only 8 in this game, this is going to turn here at some point. Like, the Brooklyn Nets are going to start winning these games. You do not consistently win across these categories and come out on the losing end. And I think that's a part of why I keep coming out of these games, win or lose, and say, nope, this process is correct. We're seeing the steady growth from this team.
Yeah, I think it's there. I do think we probably spent a little too long not mentioning that, like, the Bucks put up 129 points. Like, so there's
one thing we haven't been able to talk about is the quality defense to start the season, right? That's been something we've been missing.
Well, it's funny too, because when you look at when you look at some of the statistical breakdowns, I agree with what you're saying. It's like, hey, this doesn't look so bad on. There's parts of this that don't look so bad on paper, and then you just scroll up a little bit, and you're like, oh, 129, and like it was like, oh, yeah. Good.
No, 16 of 48 from beyond the arc for Milwaukee. They took 48 3-pointers. The Nets took 45, 33%. If you just saw, oh, they shot 33% from deep, you'd be like, hey, pretty good chance here. And then to your point, well, but if you take 48 of them, you get 16, 129. Like the scoring production, it does feel like, I'm curious if you agree, that the Nets early in the season are making concessions. Now, no Claxton, no Johnson. That does matter to the defensive abilities of this team. But it does feel like early in the season, the Nets are willing to make the concession that they know they're going to need to score. And they know they need to transition basketball. Like, that's a part, fundamentally a part of who they are. And it just means you're going to get into these kind of track meets more often than not. It's probably going to come down to moments and situational defense more than it's going to be about what we maybe thought. Hey, we're going to clamp you guys down and grind you out. Sorry. We see that we can score and be productive on that end. We have to lean into that in the NBA.
Yeah, agreed that was part of this 129 points is pace related for sure, right? Yeah. Like, so because the pace was way up in this game. It was definitely up and down. Milwaukee wants to get Giannis into transition with Simmons. Simmons is pushing the pace. It's just going to lead to more volume, and that I agree on that. I'm with you too that they are just definitely making concessions. Like, Giannis just at times had free run to the rim. They gambled a lot on him. Simmons made 2 critical errors on switches with him, where that late in the game where he came up and gambled to try to trap Lillard. It didn't work, and Giannis got a steamroll like to the rim. A few times he just got Olayed to the rim, like just bullfighter style, where he just went right around guys. And there are some problems there. I think part of it was that they were probably okay gambling because they're like, hey, we don't have a rim protector. Yep. And so we can't just go toe to toe with this guy because we don't have Claxton and we don't really have anyone that's going to be good, functional, bodied up against him. So I think, they probably were. They went a little wild man approach with that because I think they knew they probably had to try. At the same time, the defense is still kind of an issue. Like, they're having some trouble getting stops here. And they're without, I don't know if it's like the heft or if it's just that this Giannis is a particular problem, right? Because he just is. And they have faced a few of these like particular problem kind of guys like Luka, like Giannis early in the year that represent sort of like unguardable dudes to some degree, right? But at the same time, they're having a problem, and this game was like, they're having a problem with, like, there's some fundamental problems and personnel problems. And when those two things happen, then you are going to have other teams put up a lot of points. So it is a little, to me, concerning, the 129 for sure. The defense needs to be cleaned up. They're missing their best defender in Claxton and their best rim protector. And that's another guy they really could have used in this matchup specifically to throw an extra body at Giannis, and they didn't have it. So I don't know. It's definitely concerning, though. It's a lot of points, but it's also kind of hard to see how they totally fix it either.
Yeah, well, and this would be the case for why, understanding we don't know what's going to look like and if it can work, and they don't have to play together. But you need to have Nicholas Claxton as this team is currently constituted. He is the guy that does anchor this defense. We saw it last season. Ben Simmons is incredibly talented on the defensive end. He's not the same model of defender that Nicholas Claxton is. He can defend at the rim. He can take on larger matchups like a Giannis.
Theoretically, they would make a really good pairing in this game. Now, again, like, forget the offensive piece just for a second. Yeah. Like, that's its own thing. But in this game specifically, where they're dealing with a kind of unstoppable force when he gets ahead of steam going to the rim, like, you do need extra big bodies that can handle that. And the Nets, without Claxton, that they starts to get real thin. They tried Day'Ron for a little bit. They can't really match him up with Giannis because he's going to be a 0 on offense, and he's like probably not going to be able to speed bump him enough, right? Like, what you hope to have is that extra long body that can really alter like the way he's shooting up and around the rim, or alter some of his momentum to the rim, so that like you can get a hand up there, you can try to get a hand on the ball, you can try to alter the shot when he's in the air, stuff like that. They just don't have the personnel for this matchup to do it. And that's unfortunate. A lot of teams don't. And I guess I'm not really giving an answer, but I am a little worried, but defensively here, like the defense just in general has not been really that good, even if you factor in that they've missed Claxton. Like overall, the defensive rating, I believe, is bottom third in the league. I'll look real quick before we get out of here.
Yeah, and that's the point is like there are certain things and certain situations where Claxton is obviously going to be a tremendous help to this defensive unit. And yet, like I think really we've seen this theme. There's been a lot of open threes, right? There's been a lot of perimeter where you just go, wow, there seems to be infinite space here. Now you mentioned about these kind of specific matchups, and you can even throw Boston in when they have a Tatum and they also have big players like Porzingis and in that instance like Al Horford, right? But I think part of that is too, it's like a lot of teams have guys like that. If not at the superstar level, they still have functional players. We were worried about Vucevic in the Chicago matchup. Didn't bear itself out that way, but that's kind of the separation that we're seeing here. So at some point, it's just going to have to come down to that's who you're going up against. You need to figure it out as far as finding a way to do the both and. It cannot be that we can thrive offensively, but it comes at the cost of being able to play some lockdown defense for big stretches.
Well, I actually just kind of thought even without Claxton, they'd still be able to like they still have good switchable defenders here in theory, like Simmons, McHale, Dorian Finney-Smith, like Royce to some degree. Like these aren't just like defensive bums. Like these guys, it feels like there should be a few more stops in here, even with this group, and there just haven't been.
Well, what's interesting, so here's what I'd say is interesting about that on the Milwaukee side. So I would say like Dame Lillard, 34 minutes, 5 of 15, 2-8 from deep, got to the line a bunch. Okay. I think the Nets are equipped for that, especially with their defensive personnel and some of the versatility. The guy actually who's on a minutes restriction coming back is Middleton. 21 minutes, 6 of 10. Like it gives you 4 assists, 3 rebounds. Like when I saw him on the floor, first of all, I always forget. I'm like, Middleton is a big dude. You know, like with the way the Milwaukee Bucks are constructed, and you have Lopez, and then you have Giannis, and then you have Portis come in. But Middleton, he's a problem. And you saw it consistently like inside the arc, off of the elbow there, where it was just like when he wanted to rise up inside of those 21 minutes, his shots were going to be his shots. The perimeter shooting was going to be a problem. I think in that regard, Milwaukee is uniquely built with their personnel, where all of the defensive versatility for the Nets, it doesn't have the size versatility to be able to be switching assignments and still feel comfortable with it. That's a hard matchup for Dorian Finney-Smith, right? And he was on him a bunch. That's going to be a problem. If you end up with Simmons on a switch there, what's happening with Giannis when you don't have Claxton available? Even lacking Cam Johnson maybe in this one hurts you too. So from that standpoint, like it's not an excuse, but when I was watching it, especially in that fourth quarter when Middleton came in for his final 4-minute spurt that he had on his restrictions, I was like, oh, yeah, there's just too many matchups here that don't add up for Brooklyn.
Yeah, and we'll see how this goes. And again, like sometimes Milwaukee is not the game that you really want to trust, like, take all your defensive takeaways for. But on the season right now,
that's how I think about
going into this game, that's for 23rd in defensive efficiency, right? Like, so it's not like it was good. Really, and it really hasn't been above average at all, anywhere close. Now, and to some degree, they're getting bailed out because the offense, I think, has been way better than people thought. Like they're top 10 in offense, right? So it's I looked at that. They're top 10 in pace. They are 7th in offense, right? So like I think those like overall, you're like, oh, the offense is probably way better than we probably imagined. The defense is way worse, and I think probably the truth ends up being somewhere in the middle, right? I think like we could probably see some regression on the offense. And you would think there has to be some improvement on the defense here. Maybe they'll get a more, maybe just like a lightening of the schedule will help a little bit too. Like when you face, Mitchell and Luka and Jimmy and Giannis and these guys that are sort of like hyper efficient at times, right? It's like maybe that's gonna ding into your numbers a little bit. But go ahead.
Hey, good news. They'll just have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and James Harden coming up. So it's no big deal. It gets a lot easier here when you think about the schedule ahead. I will say, there was a thought that I had about this, and the way you close out a podcast successfully is kind of spacing out at the end. Listen, guys.
Oh, buddy.
It happens to the best of us. Just like the Nets. Oh, no. Here it is. Oh, good. I saved it. Don't worry. And I also said it out loud. I think when you said about coming back to the mean here, the thing the Nets are going to need to figure out is with how much we like to push the pace and how good Ben Simmons is at that, how do we allow ourselves to dictate getting into a half court, slowing the game down on both ends of the floor so that we're in control. I think sometimes you've seen this when they're running at pace and they're getting out in transition and they're getting those 3-point looks, those long rebounds, all of a sudden it leads to a little more frenetic defensive pace for this Nets team that is still probably figuring each other out a little bit, still missing pieces. And I think that's the next step for them, is playing at pace when it matters most in the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and again, I think I'm with you. I think they're going to lean into the things that work well, and we've already seen it. We're already seeing them lean into the things that work really well. It's just this other thing needs to be, yeah, Cam Thomas. Yeah,
Two more.
Agreed. But I think we will probably see some regression on some of this as we go. Okay, we're gonna jump into YouTube Live here. If you're over there, really appreciate people throwing in some comments. I know it's always a little sting, takes a little sting with the loss, but we'll go in and answer a bunch of questions here. If you're on the podcast feed, make sure you're over on YouTube. Make sure you join Subtext as well. Join subtext.com/LockedOnNets.
Humor is just another defense against the universe. That is Melvin Brooks.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow in a second on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Spaceballs. Basketball. Yeah. It's the podcast where, first and foremost, I acknowledge I lost control of the vehicle towards the end of the episode. That's the reality, folks. You're driving along. Everything's great. All of a sudden, you throw a bolt. You're going on 3 wheels, but like a true professional, I got it in for a nice soft landing. Here's one thing that I talked about in the pregame, Doug, in the game preview that we didn't get to discuss, and I'm sure we will on a full episode. Nick Claxton's dealing with an ankle sprain, and he's going to be out for a little bit longer than a glute. And this is like kind of gone under the radar. It almost like went on the radar here because the Nets have been playing good games and they've been in these big battles late. Claxton could be out for the better part of a month here. And that's going to dramatically change what happens over the course of these games. Because I think we'll keep coming back to the same thing. Well, if you just had Claxton, then defensively you could do X, Y, and Z. Right, you don't. And they don't have anybody else that can remotely replace that quality.
Yeah, it's a brutal beat to lose him here for so long. There's pretty critical. Like even if you don't love the Simmons and Claxton pairing, which I don't, even that it's like you'd be insane. Nah, forget this. Like,
no. I'm not saying it. Gerard, frequent flyer, get him up there at Locked On Nets. I'm bringing it up to say this is not a one. This is not a 1-to-1 replacement. Nicholas Claxton is a unique, high level, versatile defensive player. And you cannot just look down deep in your bench. You cannot look at Trendon Watford. There's nobody to look at. You can't look at small ball lineups with Dorian Finney-Smith and think you're ever going to replace that production that he provides you on the defensive end. I love Gerard, but it's like there's nobody on the team. Same way that when Ben Simmons went out, when he went out for that game and had the back management, you saw how it impacted the team. You cannot replace certain players 1-to-1. You can do it with Cameron Johnson. To a certain extent, you can do it with Mikal Bridges even. You cannot do it with guys like Ben Simmons and Nicholas Claxton.
Yeah, the guy was like a borderline defensive player of the year candidate last year. I mean, he got votes. So like, this is not a replaceable piece. And just being tall does not mean you're a replacement. I know everyone loves Harry Giles because this is just wash, rinse, repeat on guys who don't get to play and wanting to see them play more. And the guy's played like 30 total minutes in 3 years. And he had he had one decent game against an Israeli club team. I just don't know why we think it's the answer. And so I just will never understand it. And look, if they're down bad and they just desperately need to bring these guys in, but they're not getting rolled in these games. They're in close games. Basically every game has been close. Right. 4-point loss, 10-point loss to the Celtics. That game is probably a little closer than 10 points. Win. 5-point loss to the Mavs, 1-point loss to the Cavs. These aren't Harry Giles moves away from winning. I just don't.
I like the idea. Going forward, we will refer to these little moves as, was it a Harry Giles move away from maybe being different? No, and I know, and these are things. Let's get away from that because I know these are things that drive you up a wall as well. They should. The other thing. There's another one in here that I thought was good. This is just a nice sentiment to have from Ralph Nader. I love that this guy's coming in here. Political career didn't pan out for you. Way to be a part of the podcast. I guess it's a positive, but these competitive losses are hurting my heart. We talk about it wearing thin. You and I text when these games are going on and we're down the stretch. I Every time Doug texts me something saying, I really hope that they like pull this win, and I go, they're going to. Don't worry about it. And he's like, well, that's good. That's what I prefer. Yeah.
Well, you could just like hear the energy. Like our energy is just different. Like we're like you. We're the same as everyone here in this chat. Like I probably hold it together a little better, just because like it's a professional aspect to it. But like in general, from an emotional standpoint, you could just you can hear the energy shift. Like it's harder to talk about losses, especially right after. I would vote every time for a win. Tomorrow's election day. I vote for a win, right? Like that's the kind of democracy we love. But so it definitely hurts. I'm still the next thing up is like to be competitive. So if like you're gonna lose, like I appreciate the competitive nature of these games too. That I feel, and I do feel like this team. I'll say this about the team: they're for me, they're already better than I thought they would be. If you told me they would be without Cam Johnson and Claxton for the first 7 games, I'd be like, holy cow, where this is real. This is a problem. And I know 3 and 4 is not great to look at, but the only disappointment lies here in that they've been competitive in basically all of them, right? Like this is like a different kind of disappointment than if they were just getting trucked by 30. Well, not that they're just getting trucked by 15 to 20 every game. And like, Simmons looked not himself, and there was all these other things that were going on. The tenor around this thing would be way, way worse. I think that right now the feeling is, oh, they could have been 5-2 right now.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the part that sometimes stings a little bit. And I get it, but it's a different kind of sting than, like what's going on in Memphis right now, where it's like, hey, we stink. Right? Like,
hey, it's not gonna work out.
Well, they're looking around, they're like, yeah, Ja's suspended. We're getting destroyed every game. They just finally beat Portland the other night. But
that's why you don't trade away Dylan.
So I'm just saying, like, just comparing like what the feeling could be, because I believe me that the conversation in Memphis right now is much different than like what's happening here, which is just general disappointment that they're not 5-2 instead of 3 and 4.
Here's a good one, which is a fun. This is called a callback. It happened inside of the course of the chat, but I like this one. Clearly, we need to swap out a career 39% 3-point shooter in Royce O'Neal for a career 33% Armani Brooks. Then we would have won. You got to be here for all the lies, because you would have heard someone throw that question up. I speculated it was a bad shooting night last game for Royce O'Neal. And Doug, I thought in a very loving way. I've never been like clubbed over the head, but like, and kind of felt like, oh, that was nice, thank you, and that's how that went down. So you stick with those things.
What that? Oh, about the Royce O'Neal argument about like when he doesn't shoot, when he wasn't shooting.
Yeah, when he's running cold like that. Do you ever think about, you ever think about making a switch? And you always, and you were correct. You always stick with the guy. You always go with the numbers. I think like the only time it's like you've seen this with guys, and Royce isn't even a pure specialist, so it's not even like that. There are guys that are pure 3-point specialists that when they get cold, you go, all right, we'll sit you down for a game or two and then bring you back in and let you keep firing. Like Joe Harris. When Joe Harris was playing games, you wanted him to shoot. When he was missing shots, you wouldn't say, well, maybe we take out and try, let's swap him out for Patty Mills. You'd be like, well, no, we're going to go with the guy that it's a career high volume, high success rate 3-point shooter until he goes the other direction. So that was me falling under the spell of recency bias. This is another good one. I think at least a good discussion point. Since his rookie year, Ralph, God, you're firing off here, man. You're killing it. Nets are 8-18 when Cam scores 20. Now, 20 plus points. Now, that's skewed by the fact that he played in garbage games. He's definitely won me over, but how do we turn his best games into wins? I do think something that'll happen specifically to this season, there's going to become a fatigue factor around discussing incredible performances from Cam Thomas that the team doesn't win. This isn't about him, but at some point, like, he'll have bad games. He'll have off nights. So you really want to maximize a 45-point performance on excellent percentages from inside and outside the arc. God, do you want that win? Because that's a great reward for a young kid who's clearly now he's the number one scoring option on this team. Like he's the number one, like hands down. There's no other way around it. That he is your number one best option, and you need to get these wins sometimes, I think, for him.
Yeah, I really wouldn't read into this stat at all. There's too much.
No. Yeah, just the idea of just getting this, just wanting these wins when he plays well.
Yeah. I think we all want that. I think that it's like that record thing is totally skewed. Those were, he was playing in those, like it was him, Patty Mills, and guys who just aren't even in the NBA anymore, like kind of lineups that were going. So I just wouldn't use that at all. Yeah, I do wonder sometimes about like super high volume scorers that don't do anything else. Like how sustainable of a winning model that is, I'm not sure.
Lillard in Portland.
What's that?
Damian Lillard in Portland, right?
Well, they went to the Western Conference Finals with him at some point, though. Like
I know,
like
but I'm saying in totality for the number of years that he was there, you would say, right? Like, he's always great, but the team was not. The team was hardly ever, right?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't use that as the comp. I would say more like, well, I don't know if I have a comp here, but I guess my thing is, because even like Lillard's best years, like he was. I was just gonna look this up real quick. I'm pretty sure he was like an 8 or 9 assist guy too. Yeah, 7.5 assists. Like Lillard for his career is like, I mean, those best years of Portland, he was like 7.5, 8, 7 assists a game. I mean, Cam doesn't do any of this. Like he's averages 2 assists a game on pretty big minutes. So I guess my point is, it's like, now, I don't think there's a corollary between like when he doesn't shoot and the ball doesn't go in, they win. Like that's also doesn't make any sense, right? Because like he has got 2 lower scoring games.
Maybe we'll win more.
Right. Like that obviously doesn't make any sense either. Yeah. But I do wonder a little bit around like okay, let me put it this way. The margin for error around a player like that is much less because he just doesn't you're going to get his scoring, but you're also just going to need to get every stop in the world. And there's not going to be, like, there's other teams aren't trying to take him away. Like what you'll notice too is like right now. So like those best years in I'm going on kind of weird with this one, but I'm going to land the plane right here. What you'll notice around some of those other guys is that they have a gravity to them because defenses will start changing the way they think because this player is on the court, trapping, hedging, right? Like getting their best matchups. No one's doing that for Cam right now. It's like annoying when he scores a lot, but there's no defense that's being constructed to stop him right now. I actually wonder how much teams like really care, right? If he's doing it or not. He never gets trapped. Like he never gets doubled really. Like, and so yeah, it's not like the Nets have just like this, arsenal of firepower around him that can like punish them. It's like I just don't think the other teams really care that much. So I do wonder a little bit about that because like Dame's best games, like he was getting doubles on him, like he was having the split screens, right. And like they were trying to hedge trap him, and he would just blow through the middle of them and get to the rack. That's not happening with Cam right now. And so I don't know. Maybe there is a ceiling on like how good your team can be when he's like a super high volume guy.
Well, it's funny too, and you mentioned the assist and also just the attention that Dame Lillard commanded when he came in in 2012, but they went on a run starting in 13-14 where it was, they lost in the semis in the Western Conference, lost in the first round, lost in the semis, lost in the first round, lost in the first round, conference finals, and then lost in the first round back-to-back seasons through 2020, 2021.
So but he was the best player in the team, and they really weren't that good after him, and he got him to the playoffs every year. Like, I don't think Thomas can do that. Like I don't think he can do that.
Right. This would be more point. Maybe a play-in tournament team in today's NBA, like being in the somewhere in the 9 or 10 range. If it was just him on any given roster, high volume scorer, maybe you see it, or maybe he's just a guy that puts up a lot of points in the team.
He averages the same amount of assists as turnovers, which is 1. 2. Sorry, that was for his career. He has 2.3 assists this year and 1.2 turnovers. He's an incredible scorer. So I love watching him. I want the volume to be there. I'm just saying he's not a complete offensive player. He's amazing at one thing.
Yeah. So let's go. Let's stay on that thread then for a second. Do you think that then maybe if we're talking about him specifically, that might be the next arc of his development? Now he's showing it. We know, okay, can you score in games that matter, right? Okay, clearly prove that. Now is the next part, and we've seen little moments. I mean, 3 assists in tonight's game. When he makes the assist, it's like, oh, that's really good. But is the way that this team maybe converts his big scoring performances into more wins is that they do start to get some of those scheme plays that, hey, when he starts to draw more attention, because he will, if he's going to keep playing like this, how do you make sure you identify and get the easy buckets around the basket for Ben Simmons, for Nick Claxton, other perimeter shooters? Like maybe at some point you need him to be a 25 and 5 guy as opposed to a 30 and 1 guy, right? Like that may be the difference in terms of how he can help impact this team wins and losses.
Yeah, like maybe because like again, the 3-point, like for him, like if you look at his numbers this year, like the 3-point shooting, well after tonight, I guess it's probably improved a little bit. But the 3-point shooting is still under 34%, right? Like if you just look in the aggregate around like what the numbers are so far, they're not hyper efficient numbers on the season. He has games like this where he spikes it and it looks really, really good. Yeah, he was 6 for, okay, right. So he's 6 for 16 from 3 tonight. So he's probably at 34.5% or something like that on the season, which is like okay on volume. I think you'll be okay with it. And his threes are typically of a higher degree of difficulty than some other just spot up shooters because he's beating bigs off the dribble and stuff like that. Yeah, I just think that there's no scheme. It will be interesting to watch this as it goes forward, is to say, is anyone making any changes here, or are they just happy to let him do this with the understanding that we'll probably just run into one of his bad nights and that's not going to be a big deal for us?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and so I do wonder, I wonder how that moves going forward. And again, I'm still voting for him to go out there and ball because I think that he's so good at this thing, but it's just, I think it is an interesting sort of subplot to like the numbers for him.
And just to your point, he went 2 of 6 against Boston from deep, 3 of 9 against Chicago. He opened the season 2 of 5, 1 of 4, and 1 of 4 from deep. So, he has 4 games 33% or under, and 2 that are above that margin. So, finding that consistency. And I thought that he would be even more of a volume shooter. I also wonder that just from a winning and losing standpoint, again, we mentioned Nicholas Claxton. Cameron Johnson, I mean, you can take to heart when Jacques Vaughn said we want him shooting close to 10 times a game from beyond the arc. They're putting up 43s a game here. That volume keeps increasing as the season rolls on. Cam Johnson is a big part of that in terms of having consistency night over night. You mentioned about like a Royce O'Neal or a Lonnie Walker or an Armani Brooks or a Dorian Finney-Smith. These guys have done in their career and they have a certain baseline, but Cameron Johnson can be the guy that every single night does not have a 25-point performance. It was like Joe Harris in his prime. Hey, I can be a 38% to 40% guy every single night from beyond the arc consistently, game over game. And that changes how effective you can be when you're on the offensive end and just having a concrete understanding. Hey, we get this from this guy every night.
And I'll say too, this 3-point strategy is 100% the correct way to go. Like this is, I know some people hate it, but this is so correct to me that it's not even a question. Like this is exactly how they should be playing. They should be bombing threes as much as possible. They don't really have good rim finishers on the team. They don't really have good interior finishers. I don't want anyone to play in the post at all. So like This is, with the way this team is made up, they have 2 guys who are pretty good off the dribble who can get into the mid-range. I'll put a 3 because Lonnie Walker's actually decent at it too. They have like a guy on the coming off the bench in Lonnie Walker who has been, he's punching above his weight too. Like he's been really good. But the rest of the guys, this is just what their team is made up of. Like this is exactly the strategy that they should do. And I get that people are like, don't like it because when they don't go in enough, you lose. And you just look at it and you say, oh, we're shooting all these 3-pointers. Can we try? They don't have the guys. Like they don't have guys that finish at the basket. They don't have a lot of guys that can take guys off the dribble. Yep. They just don't have them on the roster. It's like they're not on the bench sitting there and Jacques Vaughn refuses to play them. Like he did that for Cam Thomas for a while, and now he plays them. They don't have anyone else down there that can do those other things. So at that point, just shoot threes and hope that everyone kind of shoots their career averages and you make 37% and you win. And the last couple of games, it hasn't really worked out, but it's not because the strategy hasn't been correct.
And again, Cameron Johnson, though he'll shoot a ton of threes, he is the next best player that they have after these couple of guys that can take somebody off the dribble or that can be that unlike, let's even say right now, you mentioned Cam Thomas and, hey, you're going to get whatever shots you get. We're comfortable with that. People will run Cameron Johnson off the 3-point line every single time he's out there if they can. And when they do that, he can actually attack at the basket, and maybe that helps create a little bit of different dynamic. Worth noting, we asked this question coming into the season. I'll take out Trendon Watford because he hasn't played hardly at all. But Armani Brooks, it is one game for him too. He's 83%. But they have Dorian Finney-Smith is shooting 49% from deep. 45% for Spencer Dinwiddie. Lonnie Walker's at 43.5%. Dennis Smith Jr., who's taken some shots, 40%. And then Mikal Bridges and Cam Thomas right now struggling at 34 and 31%. And then I'm not even going to drag Royce O'Neal because he had one bad game, and that's really suckered his numbers down right now. But they are getting it. Like the percentages are there. You actually just need some of the guys that you would have said, oh, box checked. These guys will give us 37, 38% from beyond the arc. If O'Neal and Bridges and Thomas start hitting what we think their percentages can be this year, then a lot of these games turn too.
Yeah, agreed. And I just think that that's just their path to winning, given this current personnel, given this group of guys that they have in the court right now, where they're not going to run. We go through this a ton, and we'll go through the rest of the season. They don't really have pick and roll ball handlers outside of Dinwiddie. Like, they don't have any lob threat really without Claxton, right? They don't have guys who can bulldog their way to the rim, except for kind of Cam Thomas can, but the rest of them really can't. Like, they just don't have it, and we can't like make it happen. Like, it's just not what these guys can do. But that's okay, actually, because the thing they can generally do is play hopefully decent switching defense and hit threes. And I just think the volume of threes is good. There was a couple times early in the season where and it was actually really when Claxton and Simmons were starting together, where the 3-point attempts were so far down. And I was like, they can't do this. Like, they can't, like, this is too few threes. Like, they can't win. They can't win like this. That has changed. And I think that's good coaching. Like, that's the correct thing to have done. Even if I think people probably get frustrated with it because, there's boomers out there that don't like to see people hit threes, I guess. I'm not to take threes.
Yeah, they had 27 in the opener against Cleveland, attempts from beyond the arc, and then against the Mavericks, they put up. No, it was almost immediate. I think that first game, it was like, no, thank you, 43 against the Mavericks, and went 21 of 43. And to your point, like, and 21 of 43, when you shoot 48% for beyond the arc, it's just going to keep you in games more, and it's what this team is built to do right now. There wasn't anything. There's nothing really crazy stuff. Someone asked about. I'm going to keep the trade discussion stuff away just because it's close to the deadline stuff, and we'll have that conversation when we get there. This was the other one. So that Ruko and Sarah Kustok mentioned last game that Day'Ron leads the league in offensive rebound percentage. I like the framing of time to unleash the beast. But do you think?
Well, that's like that rebound percentage thing is a flawed stat. He just gets a lot of rebounds when he's on. He gets rebound percentage just means the percentage of your team's rebounds that you get when you're on the court. Right.
And he's going to be the only guy that's going to get them when he's on the court. So
correct.
It's just,
correct. Now, he is a good per minute rebounder, but he's not. That's a weird stat for them to quote, because that just means he's getting. I'm pretty sure that just means he's getting a higher percentage of his team's rebounds than anybody else who's on the court. Right. So like the better stat would be like, rebounds per minute or something like that. And the reason I know this is I was actually looking this up the other day, and he was lower than I thought he was going to be, because I was going to send something out that was like, hey, he's great at this. And I was like, oh, he's actually like in the 50s. Oh no,
this is not the information I was hoping to discover.
Let me see if I can find it. Well, maybe I closed it out. It was a query I had. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was lower than I thought it was going to be. The other thing is too, he just doesn't do anything else well except for rebound. Like, he literally.
That was going to be the thing that I was going to get to, was like, if from a Day'Ron Sharpe perspective, the reason why he gets so many rebounds is because defensively he anchors himself by the basket. You're not going to pull him out away from it, or if you do, it's a problem defensively. And then offensively, he's going to try to get himself underneath the basket and get those offensive rebounds when available. Realistically, if you want Day'Ron Sharpe to have real value for this team, again, it's the thing that no one that is identified as a quote big will ever do for the Brooklyn Nets right now is shoot from the perimeter, right? Like, we've seen him try to do this, but it doesn't matter ultimately. It's not going to be a part of it. It's not going to happen. And in lieu of that, the rebounds don't make a big enough of a difference. It does not make the Nets. He played, how many minutes did he play tonight? The Brooklyn Nets lost the rebound battle by 2 against the Milwaukee Bucks, without having any real Day'Ron minutes in this game. So what, it's like that thing doesn't matter to this team winning or losing these games. They just need more shooting. They need more on-ball creators that can go at the basket and take on defenders. So it's unfortunate. I like Day'Ron, but the role is always going to be mitigated when you are a purely, as we were talking before, right? Cam Thomas is purely a scorer. He does not have anything else to his game right now. It's not a knock on him. It just is what it is. Day'Ron can rebound the ball. That is all that he can do for you right now, and that's not enough to significantly impact wins and losses.
Yeah. I wanted to do more. I wanted to maybe do some pick and pop threes and stuff like that. It always seemed like it was going to happen. Again, part of the problem here is they don't have the personnel for this either, because they just don't have much in the way of this kind of ball handler, and it's not the scheme they run at all. So, but I don't know. He just doesn't. Nothing else pops for him really.
I'll close out on these two thoughts. One, that like the Dennis Smith Jr. piece, like I got to figure out what you want to do with him, because he seems like the guy that could orchestrate a second unit offense for you. But every when he gets on the court, it just doesn't seem like they've quite figured it out yet. Because he could unlock somebody in the second unit, potentially a Day'Ron Sharpe, but that doesn't make sense to me. And the other thing,
he never should have played tonight. Like tonight,
no, I know. And then tonight's
tonight was
example
not
when he
the
shouldn't have been on the
matchup.
court. Yeah,
tonight was not the matchup because he has to be paired with Sharpe basically, and then there's just never enough offense. And I don't know. I think there are matchups for him that are going to be okay, but this just wasn't one of them. Like he doesn't have an obvious mark except for Lillard, and they're not going to snake enough screens to really like make it worth it. So I don't know.
Day'Ron Sharpe only played 8 minutes in this game and didn't have any rebounds. So, against a difficult matchup with a lot of big guys, it didn't really pan out for him in a very small sample size. The other one we said in the episode, just Spencer Dinwiddie. We're going to try to find out. We'll talk about it on our off day episode before the next game for Brooklyn. But
I hope he's not hurt because he was playing really well. I don't know why he was out.
Yeah, three rebounds, 3 assists in 24 minutes, a plus 13 on the line. Like, again, we've seen this now early in the season when like he leans into whatever is needed from him, right? Like, so you need me to orchestrate the offense more and feed guys, I can do that. You want to take a few more threes, I can do that. He seems pretty critical to the success this year, and I'm wondering, having missed a little bit of time, if it was just like a re-aggravation, which would, by the way, pile right on to the worst case scenario for the Nets early in the season when there is so much positivity on the court. You keep having these guys drop down, right? Claxton, Johnson, Dinwiddie. Like, you need a fully healthy team here at some point.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get out of here. Much appreciated, everyone that jumped in. Got some stuff to get this podcast posted for the night. We will be back. No basketball on Tuesday for Election Day. Back again Wednesday. Is that when they play the Clippers on Wednesday? So we'll be in after the Clippers game on Wednesday. Old friend James Harden, who lost to the Knicks tonight and looked terrible in the process. So we'll see how it happens. We'll see how it happens here on Wednesday. We'll be back again. Much appreciated, everyone that jumped into YouTube.
Back next time. Sorry, I spaced out. Talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball. Basketball, post-game podcast, basketball, yeah.